The Egani Institute in New York, which was Eddie's Glass and Neon Institute, pretty much the wellspring for most of the glass blowers in the United States today. Somehow, some way, they are linearly related to that, as am I, because the guy that basically taught me in the 6-week course enough to get myself killed and then turn me loose. So I, right out of the box, started to do some pretty challenging work. I would do their work in the daytime, and then at night when everybody went home, I would stay there and practice.
Hello, disclaimer here. There's something I have to tell you before we can begin. The information provided by Taming Lightning is designed to provide helpful information and to educate on the subjects discussed. That being said, the information provided is true and complete to the best of our knowledge, and is not intended to be used without professional guidance or supervision. All recommendations are made in good faith by both Taming Lightning and affiliates, to which we disclaim any liability in connection with the use of the information we provide. Thus, we ask that you be safe, be informed, and ask questions. Let's get right to it. Welcome back, or welcome to the Taming Lightning podcast. I'm Percy Eccles II. I'm the creator and host of Taming Lightning, as well as the emerging plasma tech at Pittsburgh Glass Center. Taming Lightning podcast features a series of conversations to help expand our understanding of plasma and neon light, looking beyond its associations with novelty and sign making, and to explore the potential for noble gases as an artistic medium. Hello, Lightning Tamers. This is episode number 35. In today's podcast, we have Rusty Russo, who's been working and developing his skills in the area of illuminated glass tubing for over 30 years, in which he's acquired an expert-level proficiency in glass fabrication, vacuum tube processing, system design and construction, leak detection, technical support, packaging design, and technical writing. He's also a Senior R+D Glass Blower at the Boston-based startup specializing in energy-efficient, inductively coupled soda-lime light bulbs. From his beginnings as a neon bender, he's worked as a technical consultant for the EGL Co, a columnist for the Signs of the Times magazine, demonstrating artist and technical assistant for the Glass Art Society, and assistant instructor and visiting artist for various education facilities such as the Pittsburgh Glass Center, Penland School of Craft, and Urban Glass. Additionally, a recognized industry authority on all phases of neon vacuum tube production, having served as co-chairman of the ISA Research and Standards Committee on Neon Processing, where he co-created an internationally recognized standard for processing neon tubing. This provided a practical, teachable, repeatable solution to which has been a historically random intuitive process. He currently works as a freelance technical consultant and glass artist, conceptualizing and creating three-dimensional sculpture using glass, light, and mixed media. I met Mr. Russo in the summer of 2018 during the Pittsburgh Glass Center's first plasma workshop taught by Wayne Stradman and Mundy Hepburn, where he assisted alongside Anders Mikkelsen. Now, in the chaos of that class, Rusty was a grounding tether to the complexities of plasma and neon, someone who was very comfortable with meeting you at your level. He's been such a great source of information and support in regards to troubleshooting and identifying components in the manifold, and helped provide confidence and guidance in my career development and technical consultation on several jobs. Like many of our guests on this podcast, Rusty has a rich history and knowledge, and we barely scratch the surface of who Rusty is. Treat this as it is, an introduction. He'll talk about his origins and his interest in neon, the influence of music and martial arts on his practice and teaching philosophy, and his drive towards excellence through repetition, self-examination, and refinement.
So I am a full-time neon tube bender, which involves making luminous tubing for art and commercial signage. I don't make retail signs. I actually wholesale them to people who put them into. Right now, I'm working kind of in a narrow bandwidth. I'm doing a lot of restorations of old vintage neon signs and recreations of those signs, Americana, things like that, petroleum signs, roadside signs. And I also teach privately, and I've done quite a bit of group classes at various well-known locations. But my interest in this began, when I was a child. My parents had a restaurant. It's a pretty funny story, but this is back in the early 1960s. And they didn't have daycare at that time, and they used to take me to the restaurant when I was a little twerp and stick me in a high chair. And the entertainment I really had was there was a neon sign right over my head, and that was my internet, that was my TV, that was what I got to engage with. It fascinated me. I had nothing to do all day but sit in the high chair, and they literally would seatbelt you in so you couldn't get out. And that was safety. Didn't even approach any kind of abuse, but I used to watch the sign and look at it and try to figure it out. And it had an energy, and it buzzed, and it glowed, and it was unlike anything else in the room. And it really stuck with me. And I always wondered as time went on what that was, how it worked, how it came to be. And, fast forward 10 years, I had gone to Italy with my parents, and we went to Murano, and I saw glass blowing, live glass blowing out of a furnace. And I watched this guy make a bird, and I was absolutely floored by it. I had never seen anything like that in my life. And I really got interested in glass. And fast forward a little more, I started playing music I aspired to be a professional musician. I really, really loved music. My friends were all musicians. This is what we did. We would stay inside and practice and, relentlessly, and we wrote music and we recorded music, and, we wanted to, quote unquote, live our lives as successful musicians and role models. I had all these grandiose dreams, which didn't come true, but, really glad I did what I did. But I had, through my interest in music, I developed these attachments to where does this come from? How do you even make a sound? What is a sound? And you start to look at energy and different frequencies and wavelengths. And then I started to understand the electromagnetic spectrum, and then you start to understand how light plays into that. And really all we're seeing, everything around is basically some type of manifestation of that energy. And it takes on different forms at different wavelengths. So we had light, we had sound, we had interest in a neon sign, we had interest in glass, we had all of this coming together. And, I started to think, well, neon, that's all of this. That's glass, it's light, it's electricity. And I started to look into it, and nobody could really explain to me what it was all about. I would get all these superficial explanations and a lot of pretty much just folklore about it. And it was very unsatisfactory to me. So I started to delve into this, and like I said, my parents had another restaurant at that time, and it was a guy that used to go in there and eat every day for lunch, and he owned a sign company, and my dad needed a sign. So he built the sign for my father, and I got talking with him, and by this point, I had realized that if I wanted to have an automobile with 4 hubcaps and eat every day, I wasn't going to be playing music anymore to try to make a living. So I said, I really want to learn how to make neon. And he looked at me, he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "I'm really serious." because he had heard this before. And it's not a very easy thing to do or to pick up. Number one, there's very few people to learn from. And number two, you've got to really love to practice. And because I was a musician and a martial artist, I love practicing. I find that very gratifying, to repeat things to the point where they're actually fluid and locked into your muscle memory. And, when you can do something with a, level of success and excellence on a consistent basis, I find that personally very rewarding. So it's kind of a self-development thing. So I went, he said, come by the sign shop, and really, really nice guy. And I walked in, and there was a guy at the big drafting table. He had his head in some books, and he didn't look up. He said, can I help you? I said, yeah, I'm here to see Tony. He said, about what? I said, well, I want to learn how to make neon. And he literally dropped his pencil, and he pushed his glasses up on his nose, and he said, you're the first guy in 25 walk through that door and say that. Are you serious about it? And I said, no, I'm really serious. So he said, well, you're going to have to go to neon school. I'm like, well, what's that? And, I'm thinking it's some kind of a well-established brick and mortar. And really, it was almost a metaphor for what I was going to have to do. But they said, if you're serious, there's a guy teaching a class. It's a 6-week course. And, $3,600, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. And if you complete that and you make it and you get your diploma, you can come here and you can work for us. So they took me into the neon plant, is what it's called. And it literally was a room that I don't think they opened the door to this place in 10 years. So the doors swung creaky, the lights are off, there's cobwebs all over the shop in this building. And these two guys were both World War II veterans, and one was a fighter pilot, the other guy was a gunner on a B-17 bomber. And needless to say, they had been through a lot, and they went through the war at a young age. But through the VA program, you could get an education when you got back. And they both went to the Egani Institute in New York, which was Eddie's Glass and Neon Institute. Pretty much the wellspring for most of the glass blowers in the United States today. Somehow, some way, they are linearly related to that, as am I, because the guy that taught me basically taught me in the 6-week course enough to get myself killed, and then turned me loose. And then I went to the design company, and because they knew my family, and they knew I was pretty serious about this, they said, well, here's what we'll do. We'll get this place energized, and you can start doing all of our repair work, because they had, it was a good sized sign company, and they had big accounts in, big box stores of that era, and like Kmart, and, a lot of supermarkets and a lot of big retail stores. And they had large scale neon signs. So I, right out of the box, started to do some pretty challenging work. And I was able to stay there all night long if I wanted to. They gave me the keys to the place, the burglar alarm code. So I would do their work in the daytime. And then at night, when everybody went home, I would stay there and practice. And I would practice, and then I would make art at night. Just all kinds of crazy things that they had never seen. They would come in, and there was this general enthusiasm. They were really happy that somebody else was learning the trade. So not to beat this to death, but I worked there for a while, kept my relationship with them, and I went out and established my own neon sign company. And I did that for quite a while, and I made art, some of which I did some pretty good sized commissions, some of which is still up and running. I did something called the Theater Active Design for Brown University. It was architectural neon lighting back in the 1980s, and it's still up and running. That was a pretty high profile installation. I did a beautiful installation for New England Technology School, and that ran for 26 years straight. which is not an exceptionally long time, but the only reason it's not still running is they took the whole thing down because they actually moved the campus. That's New England Institute of Technology, but it was 3 8.5-foot steel trusses with an illuminated core that I had to engineer and hang in space over in an atrium over a fountain. So it was pretty challenging. I had gone back to take some pictures many years later, and the security guard approached me. He said, "Oh, you saw me taking the pictures," and he said, "Some guy put that up." I don't know. Like I said, I think it was like 20-something years prior to when I was there taking the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Some guy put that up 20-something years ago. We never shut that thing off. And I kind of smiled at him. I said, "Yeah, I'm the guy that put it up." He said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, No. And he goes, "Oh, we love that," and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I had a mix of commercial signage and art. I did a lot of gallery shows and started to teach people.
So I have a quick question. So regarding like your exploration of with art, what were you mostly doing with art? What kind of things were you making?
Because I wasn't doing offhand glass blowing out of a furnace, I was limited to the crossfire, the type of fires that are used to bend tubing for signage. So I would try to stretch the boundaries of what you could do with that. So that would involve initially what I refer to as glass mangling, and then that evolved into something that actually looked like art, and so it was trying to master the material to manifest what I could conceive in my mind with the tools that were available. So there was no furnace, there was no glory hole. I basically had different types of torches, so I could heat X amount of glass up and try to keep it hot and try to manipulate it into the shape that I was trying to achieve. So I would take tubing and I would gather it in the fires. Gather meaning make the wall thicker, so when you blow it out, you still have something that can support a vacuum. And I would make different shapes and use different scientific glass blowing techniques like Marias, etc., and intersperse them with spheres and Marias and more spheres and bends and other things. So I would get these kind of really fluid organic shapes, and I would use different color tubing, and I would experiment with etching phosphor out of the inside of the glass tubing. And I don't know if you want me to explain what phosphor is, I can, but just to keep the story moving, I made some pretty interesting pieces that would be hung in space and basically look like neon clouds. And then I would go in a complete opposite direction and do very rigid, structured pieces with, I would use iron, found objects. I use some ceramics, but basically the interplay between the glass and the other materials. I went in a whole bunch of different directions. I worked really small. I worked really big. I did a lot with color. I did a lot with subdued discharges, I would use mercury and phosphor to get things really bright. I would use argon gas with no mercury, so you'd have very dim, subtle pieces. And I had the luxury, because it was my own place and my own studio, I could do whatever I wanted. The only thing was I had to pay the bills. So I also, had to do quite a bit of commercial signage. And the advantage to that is you got to be really good at bending tubing if you're going to do that and be successful. So I would practice. I would always try to keep my skill up. And, when I say you have to be good, you have to be very accurate, because a lot of the glass that you bend has to fit into borosilicate housings, and they're not really big. It kind of looks like a socket, and the electrodes on the end of the tubing, have to fit into there perfectly. And as you well know, like, you can't kind of stretch the glass if it doesn't fit after you've made it. It's got to. So you're able to manipulate the material in a very predictable way, which is a good thing. And one time I had there was a gentleman that ran a theater group, and he wanted me to make neon antlers. And right now I'd say you're out of your mind. I can't make them out of soft glass. I mean, which I can, but I probably would have just dismissed the whole thing right now. But at that time I was like, hey, yeah, no, that sounds great. And I actually pulled it off, and they didn't come out too bad. They looked really good and very convincing. It was single electrode tubes, so I had one electrode on each side of the rack. And in fact, Wayne Stratman pumped those for me because I didn't really have any way I didn't have an oven. And I had met Wayne at a gallery show in Providence, and he was writing for Science of the Times magazine at the time. He wrote the neon technical column. He did an excellent job on it for years, and got a lot of great information out to people because, in the neon sign industry, there's some people who really know and adhere to processing procedure. They actually understand what's happening with it. And there's a whole nother group of people that I call the people of the torch. And they practice, it's like a black art, and you can't no matter what you do, they're incorrigible, and you can't tell them anything. But Wayne and I kind of got together. We hit it off, and we've been friends for a really, really long time. Done a lot of traveling together with the Glass Art Society. I helped him out at Penland, and I was able to sit in on a bunch of other things that he's done. We've worked on collaborative projects together, but through our association, we both kind of benefited through the relationship. I got to the point with my business where it was really tough to sustain what I was doing. It was a lot of competition, and it was really tough to keep the prices up because we had some bottom feeding people who drove the prices down, and people really weren't that interested in quality. They just wanted to, get it up there and didn't want to pay too much. And, there's a downside to that, but I was looking around for some way that I could elevate myself. And luckily I got a phone call from a company in New Jersey, who was the world's largest producer of glass electrodes, phosphor-coated tubing, and sign fabricating equipment in the world, and went down for an interview, and they hired me. So I went to work for them as a tech, and I would do customer support, technical support. They would fly me out to different huge sign companies to troubleshoot for them. So I got to, go out to, Philly Signs, Artcraft Strauss, Yesco. These are big sign companies. And, I got familiar with exactly how things are done and how to do things on a professional level. And I because I was a glass blower, I could relate to the people who were working there. I wasn't, I don't want to say just an engineer, because that's an accomplishment and a respectable one. But a lot of times when an engineer is talking to a tradesman, there's kind of a little difficulty or resistance in communication because there's always, well, you don't know what it is to do this. Well, I did know what it was to do it, to bend glass, and I could pick up the glass at the location and actually bend it and show them where they were having trouble. And with regard to the system, I had pumped miles of neon tubing, so I knew pumping in and out, and I knew it instinctively, and I also knew it technically. So I really learned how to pay attention and listen to people and try to help them just establish a relationship with them and a trust. So a lot of people would come to me or refer to me or call me, and this is even before people were emailing each other. We didn't even have the internet, but I had a dedicated line, and the phone would ring all day long. So I got a good idea of the problems that people encounter, and I got a pretty broad background of what it takes to make good tubing that's going to last a long time, and how to, even from a design standpoint, what's good, what's bad, system designs, pumping system designs, what a quality products are, where to get them, and all of that. So, along the way, I like I said, I was fortunate enough, I joined the Glass Art Society. I actually demoed in Seattle. I did technical support for them in New Orleans. I attended a zillion conferences and learned a lot about, all different types of glass. And, my interests, I'm interested in everything. I'm a knowledge hungry fool. I mean, I love music, all kinds of music. I love martial arts. I really fascinated with science, color science. I like physics. I am by no means a physicist or a scientist, and that would become very obvious very quickly, but I'm pretty passionate about how things work and where things come from, and I've got this really endless curiosity, and then that kind of drives me forward. So right now, I'm doing glass work every single day. I practice all the time, still after doing it all these years, I'm really working on technique. I'm always trying to develop different techniques. And, it's right now, I kind of feel like I'm one of the people that's actually keeping this alive on a personal level, because, there's quite an output of work, and, these signs are going out there and they're being displayed, and that makes me feel good, because there's not a whole hell of a lot of people that are actually continuing this in the same bandwidth that I am. People are doing art with it and experimenting with it, but someone who could actually call themselves a journeyman tube bender, there's not many of us left. So that's pretty much my story. I'm sticking with it.
It's time for a quick break. Right now, we are 2 episodes in on the Intro to Plasma series with Geeks. What's the Intro to Plasma series? Well, it's a 4-chapter introduction that will provide some foundations and actionable practices on what is involved in making a plasma sculpture, so that topics like gas mixtures, manifold design, and procedures, including advanced considerations, have something to stand on. Understandably, the podcast hasn't provided a way to understand plasma in a comprehensive way, but that's why we are doing the Intro to Plasma series. Why is that? Well, besides sharing a history with neon, plasma for our uses is on the fringe of considerate study, requiring interested parties to spend time reading related materials, books, and resources to make sense of it. In my first 2 years learning about plasma sculpture, I had to simplify the scope of knowledge, skills, and equipment into categories just to process it. And when questions arise such as, how do you make plasma? The question is much bigger than that person understands. And I'm not saying this to scare you away from the subject. My point is to understand that learning, doing, and teaching are all different skills, and that it takes time to bring effective learning and teaching materials into existence. Why am I telling you all this? To encourage you, dear listener, to watch the Intro to Plasma series and to ask questions. Your attention is your interest, and through it, your engagement tells us you want to learn more. We ask you to provide more than just general questions, but questions that are specific. Here's an example from a listener. I want to learn about gas mixtures. This could be multiple questions ranging from common gases used, filling technique, or specific recipes. So I pressed the listener for more specific questions, and they answered, why do gases produce the colors they do? What dictates the behavior and colors that dominate a mixture? And why do colors change over time? Is that related to a longer aging or burn-in time compared to neon? These are great questions, and as Mr. Suba, or Bruce Suba would say, the only stupid questions are the ones you don't ask. I may not know the answers, but I know plenty of people who do, and thus we can learn together. So please, watch the Intro to Plasma series, drop a like if you do, dislike if you don't, but more importantly, leave a comment or DM your questions to Taming Lightning.
And we're back. It's great. I mean, there's so much about learning that's happening in your journey, throughout your journey. And one thing that comes up for me is like, in a similar, thread, I am learning about these things through all types of sources. And you're right, having the means and the drive to practice and improve is something all of us could use. I think for me, one of the dangers I run into is wanting to always get to making the thing, that the skill develops very slowly compared to the progression of practicing as I learn to make the thing I want to make. So with that learning and learning style, can you talk about how to teach one, learning how to learn? What things have you learned so far that kind of helped you learn?
One of the most important things about learning, you have to try to get yourself out of the way. Just stand naked, say, look, this is ground zero. I'm starting here. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to be, and you also have to ask yourself, is this really interesting to me? Like people have fascinations, and then other people have passions. And, if you're truly passionate about something, it's a lot easier to learn. So you kind of have to examine and ask yourself, is this even worth doing? And if you check that off, okay, move on to the next thing. Understand how you learn personally, because people have different learning receptivity. Some people are very visual. Some people, learn through repetition and sound. Some people have to, they actually have to move through things. I think having all of that combined is essential. But you may have one area where you really learn in the most efficient way, and that's the way you should really pursue it. And get into this pedantic, dogmatic, repeat this. You're just going to take the will out of somebody. You have to find out what makes them light up and what makes them inspired. You look at the strengths that they have, you look at the weaknesses that they have. And one of the most important things you can do to progress is you got to really recognize your own weaknesses and work on that stuff. That's the most important thing to do. It's ugly, it hurts, it's painful, but eventually you will progress. And the tools that are available to you without any investment, you have these tools. It's your mind, and you have to set you properly to learn. And one of the most important things you can do also is you have to be extremely attentive. Watch everything over and over again. Pay attention to detail. Pay attention to what you did. Pay attention to where you stand, how your hands move, your position and orientation to your work. And I'm talking specifically about tube bending right now, but this can apply to anything that you're doing. And you'll start to find out that the reason why you're making mistakes is, it's usually something that's very easily, and that is to me, it's kind of gratifying. You say, oh, all right, that's what I'm doing wrong. Move on to the next thing. And so you've eliminated one kink. Move on to the next problem that you're having. Try to identify what's going on with that. So really, basically, you're going to use your senses, use your vision, your hearing, your sense of smell, anything that's available to you. The other thing is trying to eschew the variables. Don't set yourself up for failure. You're going to set yourself up for success. So that can be as simple as clearing everything off a bench. Get yourself organized. Don't have clutter all over the place, and have some clarity and purpose about what you're going to do. Plan your work. Plan the steps. Those things are very important too. So planning and having the right materials, and thinking about the outcome. What do you want to achieve? What do you want this to look like? Get it in your mind first. You can, before you actually execute what you have to, you can run through it a few times, do dry runs without the fire. Like, just say, okay, here's the glass. This is what I got to do. I have to heat it to X amount. And my hands are going to go this way, walk through it in the air, and then put the glass down on the bench where it needs to be, because this is all bent to a pattern. And again, this can transition to any type of learning, but, being attentive, being passionate about it, it, like I said, if you're not interested in it, it's really difficult to learn, eschewing the variables where, you don't have a whole lot of extraneous crap going on. I don't like, especially if I'm teaching, I don't like a big cacophony. I like things quiet. I like people focused. And, I know you've done a lot of martial arts, but, if you think about when you learn things in a dojo, it's not a big, noisy, crazy environment. It can be, but usually when you're practicing technique, or you're doing your kata, your forms, you're walking through those things. You can do them blindfolded with your eyes closed. You're really paying attention to your body movements, how you're oriented in space. All of that comes together, and that's through repetition and through self-examination, you can get to the point of excellence. So when I teach pretty much 5 basic techniques. And if you can do the 5 techniques, you can pretty much make anything you can imagine. So I like to go through this very repetitive, analytical process where the students master these techniques, and then you can just turn the person free, and they can pretty much, if they understand how to execute each one of those, they can combine them in an infinite amount of possibilities to make whatever they want to make. But if you don't know how to do it, it can take you 10, 15 years to figure this out, how to do it right, especially if you're learning from people who are teaching that don't know what they're doing. And unfortunately, there's lots of them out there. And I'm calling them out.
That is a very clear point on that. Like, just finding your means of learning and working through something that we all need to exercise in our life, which is the capacity to problem solve. And that's what it seems like it's coming down to.
I mean,
I
couldn't agree with you more. Everybody wants a solution. Not everybody, but the trend now is fix this for me. This shouldn't be happening. I'm big on accountability and authenticity, and I think if everybody was taking care of themselves first and not waiting for somebody else to provide a solution, and helping each other versus blaming each other for things, you have a much better culture. But on a personal level with learning, yeah, be accountable. Like, just you tell yourself, I really, it's my responsibility. This is my time. It's my life. If I'm going to elevate myself and progress along the way, I'm going to learn. I have to learn how to solve this myself. Like, I'm doing this today, Percy. When I'm done with this podcast, I'm going to walk into my studio, and I've got to solve a huge problem from a design standpoint. Somebody wants a particular graphic executed in glass. Some graphics they don't translate very well. They're not really, it's very difficult to capture what the graphic is trying to convey in a linear form with glass tubing in a confined space. So I have to come as close as I can to that. And, there's nobody going to figure that out for me but me. So I have to rely on all the experience I have, knowledge I have of glass, how it behaves, what you can do, what you can't do, put all of that together and make it happen. Just shut up and make it happen. So that's what's on the table for me.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I run into that same problem when I try to do my little neon icons, where I'm trying to find, because I came through graphic design before I even got into glass, and so when I'm looking at forms that are more volume or mass related, then it's hard to find the right line to convey the same impact that it has when it's the finished image. So I can definitely see that, the difficulties of trying to figure out, well, am I representing the image to its fullest with the constraints of the medium that I'm using? And that's the medium of line.
Yeah, in three-dimensional space, and even understanding how scale. Some of the designs, if you scaled them up, they would look beautiful. But if you
Mm-hmm.
way down to something that's got to fit in a 4 foot by 4 foot area, it's doesn't work well. So in the smaller you scale it down, the smaller diameter tubing you have to use, and there's a limit to that too.
Yeah.
Consequences to that. There's a price to pay, but it's all you've got to understand, what is the purpose of this? Is this supposed to run 24 hours a day for 10 years, or is it something somebody's going to turn on intermittently when they feel like looking at something on their living room wall? All of these have different endpoints, and you have to understand that when you start to consider design, materials, what type of electrodes you're going to use, what current is it running on, what fill pressures are you using, having a good understanding of all of that and how it impacts the life of a tube is essential.
Yeah. I mean, there's this field of neon and by connection, by association, plasma requires many of us to learn the entire scope of it. So, with neon, you're learning the bending, which is a big crucial part of having the existing structure to illuminate, but also having the capacity and the equipment to clean and process and fill, but then also the knowledge of that equipment to manage and service it, as well as the knowledge of installation, and knowing where the limitations are for that would be at, and when to pass it on to another field of expertise. I know I get some questions from people about, they wanted to have some neon, but they were thinking about putting it in a space. And I said, if you're going to make some type of lighting design, no matter what, whether it's a pendant light or neon, you have to understand that your job stops where it comes to installing it into a home. When it comes to like electrical, the electrical portion is for the person that's receiving it to go upon that section. But, that's another type of piece of information that, and I've learned through talking with neon people and people who made, lighting elements for homes.
Yeah, you'd like to think you live in a world where you could just hand somebody something and say, no, plug it in, it'll be fine. You don't know where they're going to plug it in. A lot of the stuff has to be hardwired. You're dealing with high voltage, especially with plasma, because you've got the problems with capacitive coupling and, where you place the piece, the interference it can generate. It does have the potential to cause some problems in the.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, nobody wants to hurt anybody, and also nobody wants to wind up getting sued too. So there's all of these things you've got to consider, and you can start off with the best intentions. I agree with you. I mean, all of this, if anything needs to be wired in, you need to get an electrician, and if you start making things, that people are going to run in their homes, and even publicly, you got to use all UL approved components. That's what I would recommend. I'm not saying you can't make a plasma piece and have it run, perfectly without any consequences. That can happen, but you have to basically engineer those circumstances, and that those circumstances don't change over time. So this is a very pardon the pun, but it's a very fragile endeavor, with illuminated glass. I hope I hope for the future of it. I hope it continues. I mean, people are doing wonderful things with it, and it's exciting, but it's also it's very precariously perched right now.
Mm-hmm.
on it. And I am not the bellwether of what's going on in the whole world, but I got a good bit of contact with some people who are doing things on a significant level. And, Wayne in particular, he's committed himself to writing a book on plasma, which I think is wonderful because it just takes so much of the guesswork out for everybody. And I hope people really appreciate that, like what he's done. And, he also rewrote Samuel Miller's Neon Signs and Cold Cathode Lighting probably 20 years ago. And that was for people in the neon sign industry. So, he's invested quite a bit. There is a good amount of information out there about how to do things the right way. And it doesn't take much to get the information, but, people have to pursue that and be disciplined enough to understand that some of these things aren't negotiable, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a correct way to do it. It's not up for grabs, and the consequences of not doing it the right way can range from pieces that don't last very long to pieces that are very dangerous when you put them out there, in the public. So,
yep.
I don't want to just beat that point to death either, but because I don't know who the audience is for this podcast. So this is more of a kind of hopefully just kind of my story, my perspective as a human being, more than a technical, exploration of what's going on in illuminated tubing and plasma.
Yeah, I believe that the audience will appreciate that. I know sometimes the podcast can get a bit technical for a lot of people, and many of them that come in don't have a starting point just yet.
Yeah, I'm just trying to speak really from a human perspective, my timeline, where this took me in my life, and how it's still very. I don't want to say I'm attached. It's very important to me that I continue this, and it's very gratifying to me to do this every day. So I found something that I really love, and as far as me teaching, I'll teach you anything. I don't keep secrets. I'll tell you every trick I know, everything that took me, my lifetime to master. I will pass on to anybody that's interested. And, I'm not one of those guys that works behind the curtain. And, I love seeing people flourish, and I love seeing people progress. And I like to see people happy. And, I guess, to try to say something that's important about this, and why this should continue. A lot of people invested a lot of their lives in this, and, I would just hate to see the lights go dim.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time on the podcast, Mr. Rusty. I know you've been a great help and very informed and knowledgeable in the things I've been solving since we've met. Is there any way that people can contact you? Do you have I don't think you have a website, but is there an email that you are willing to share?
It's hrustyrusso@gmail.com. And my company is Ion Alchemy.
Awesome. That's an awesome company name. So cool.
But I'm going to, going forward, I'll have a website and, do the Instagram thing and all of that. But right now, I had to concentrate on getting up and running and form the company, and,
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to tell my story. It's great, Percy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Taming Lightning podcast. Music credit to the following artists. The preview is Retro by One. The opening theme, Boost by Joachim Karud. The intermission, Sunnyside by One. And the credits, The Process by Lakey Inspired. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thinking back to this recording, I really appreciate Rusty for taking the time to tell his story. There's so much more to glean from him, as well as our past guests. I hope to schedule another recording with him soon to talk about the various subjects provided in his bio and resume. I'd like to thank the Pittsburgh Glass Center for supporting me as a place of research and inspiration, the Plasma Art Alliance, where I have an access to a well of knowledge and connects me to some amazing and supportive people. Additionally, I'd like to extend thanks to Wayne Stratman for connecting me with Rusty Russo, as these connections have been one of my most valuable thus far in my career. If you'd like to support Taming Lightning, please donate to the Taming Lightning Geeks Enter the Plasma series. You can find all current episodes and information at geeks.glass. That's GEEX.glass. Should money be tight, please check out the Enter the Plasma series on YouTube and leave a comment about what you find useful and questions that you have or would like to hear for current and future chapters. I'll have a link provided in the show notes. Please share, comment, and subscribe. And as always, be safe, be healthy, and be strong, and I'll see you next time.